session is called It Ends With Me, Breaking the Cycle of Generational Trauma. And my name is Iman Khwaja. Will be the moderator for today's session. And the session is a collaboration between the FYI and the Mass Convention. So the FYI, also known as the Family and Youth Institute, is a mental health research and education institute that strengthens and empowers individuals, families, and communities by promoting youth development, healthy marriages, effective parenting, and mental health and well-being. There are a lot of other sessions with the Family and Youth Institute today during the last day of the convention, so please make sure to check them out, inshallah, and join us if you can. Alhamdulillah, by the power of Allah, we are all brought here today. Inshallah, the goal of today's session and all the sessions we attend at this convention is to benefit from them. So please make sure to take notes and so that we can internalize the things that we are learning, and make sure to share them on social media with your families, with your communities, inshallah. Before we get started, I do have a couple of quick announcements. First and most importantly, we are going to be collecting questions through the MassCon app. So if you don't have the app, please make sure to download it, find today's session, and you can submit questions through there. You can submit your questions anonymously if you'd like to do that. The FYI is doing a study on Muslim youth. So if you have any youth between the ages of 13 to 20, they can participate in the study, inshallah, and get lots of money for it. We are studying the development of character in Muslims over time. So we're looking at how these Muslim youth are developing and trying to develop resources to help families and communities with the youth, inshallah. So come visit our table, inshallah. We are just outside of this room. You can get more information about that and learn how to sign up your youth. They can make up to $595 if they participate in the surveys, inshallah. And after today's session, please make sure to look for us on social media. You can also find all of our resources online at our website, which is thefyi.org. If you can also find all of our resources outside on the table, they are available at the table and online free of cost, inshallah. Are we ready? Awesome. And with that, we are going to get started. So I do want to take a minute to introduce our speaker, inshallah. So today we have Dr. Hanan Hisham. She is a researcher and community educator at the Family and Youth Institute. She is also an assistant professor at William James College in Boston. MashaAllah, she just got promoted. She completed her master's in quantitative methods and her PhD in counseling psychology from the University of Texas at Austin. Dr. Hisham recently completed her pre-doctoral internship at the Center for Multicultural Training of Psychology at Boston Medical Center in Boston University. Her main interests are in research, clinical, and community work. Her current research focuses on the contextual factors that influence American Muslim youth development, including the role of their racial, religious, and gender identities in their everyday experiences. Regarding her clinical work, Dr. Hisham has completed training at various sites, including university counseling centers, a youth shelter, and community health centers. Dr. Hisham is also a community organizer and has focused her efforts on youth empowerment through local youth groups, regional camps, and conferences, as well as serving as an educator and mental health consultant for varying institutions. And alhamdulillah, she is dedicating a lot of time to be here today, so please make sure to pay attention, take notes, and ask questions at the end of the session, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Jazakallah khairan for being here. Give me 1 second. All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First, I just want to start off by saying Jazakallah khairan for being here. Talking about trauma is not easy, and talking about intergenerational trauma is especially not easy, because we're going to talk about you might hear yourself in some of the stories that we share today, inshallah. So Jazakallah khairan for being here and giving me your attention. So let's get started. All right, so today's talk, inshallah, is going to be on unpacking intergenerational trauma. We're going to do a few things, but before that, I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about the Family and Youth Institute, which is the organization that I work for and do these talks for. We also have a table outside if you have any more questions about the organization and how we operate, inshallah. So definitely want to say, again, thank you for joining us. Jazakallah khairan. I want you to really take a moment. If some of y'all are not morning people like me, then I really do appreciate you being here. I think it's a testament to how how important this topic is. There's a lot of people in the room. I know more people are going to be trickling in. Last year, this was one of our more popular sessions. Whenever I talk about trauma, people are always really interested and intrigued because you might kind of have a sense there's something going on in your life. There's something that's been happening. Maybe you don't have the language for it. And inshallah, I really hope that we continue to have more conversations about this topic so that we not only recognize what's happening within ourselves, but are also able to break the trauma, the cycle that happens through the generations. So the Family Youth Institute is a national research and education institute focusing on Muslim mental health and family wellness. So this is an example of some of the education that we do, and Iman shared with you earlier some of the research that we do as well. So I really recommend that you visit our website, check out the work that we do. Our mission is to strengthen and empower individuals, families, and communities through research and education. We have 4 focus areas: mental health, marriage, parenting, and youth development. I like to think that this talk covers all 4, inshallah. We do use a public health model versus a medical model. I'm going to skip just some of these slides to get to the content of our talk, but feel free to, again, visit our table there outside, inshallah, for more information about the organization. So this is not supposed to say marriage prep, it's supposed to say intergenerational trauma. So just a disclaimer, although I am a therapist, I'm a psychologist by training, this is not going to be therapy. Although I do welcome any questions that you have afterwards, whether it's at the Q&A part of the session or even afterwards, inshallah, I'll be here. I'm very happy to sit with you and talk about some of the things if you need any kind of resources, etc. This is not designed to address individual problems, although you may hear some of the stories that I share or some of the examples that I share, you might hear it in yourself. So it might kind of like be, honestly, a little bit triggering. So I just want to just give you a warning. I don't usually give trigger warnings because I think that honestly, I think life is very triggering. There's so many things that we experience as we move through the world that can be very difficult. And so part of existing as a human being, subhanAllah, is to just understand that you're going to encounter things in your life unexpectedly that are going to bring up memories, that are going to kind of impact your physiology. And so what I want to just make sure to say to everybody here is that if there's anything that I bring up and you're starting to feel your heart race, you're starting to feel your body get tense, you're starting to feel yourself kind of not pay attention anymore, just listen to that feeling. It's okay. You can tune in and tune out. This is being recorded. Also, the talk from last year is also recorded. There's going to be some overlap, some new things that I'm going to share today. And so I just want to be very careful that, to speak delicately about things that are going to come up today, inshallah. But also, I really, really want you to prioritize your well-being through this conversation. All right, so today, inshallah, we're going to do 3 things. We're going to talk about, first, we're going to define what is trauma. This is a term, as mental health conversations and talks continue to become more popular, we start to hear a lot of terms that people use very casually, right? That's so traumatic. I have PTSD from that. People say things like, oh, I have OCD, you're being psychotic. And so some of these words, they're in our colloquial language now, which is fine, alhamdulillah. But sometimes when we get to actually the nitty-gritty and we're really talking about the things that really cause us distress, it's important to really define what these words mean. And so we're going to start with the definition. What is trauma? How do you know that something was traumatic? Then we're going to talk about 3 ways that trauma is transferred through the generations. It's going to be kind of 2 ways, but one of the ways I'm going to break it into several parts. So trauma is transferred through the generation in many ways. One of the classes that I teach is lifespan development. And so in that class, lifespan development, we go through the entire lifespan. We start actually before we talk about pregnancy, we talk about parenting, we talk about the role of people coming together to even have children, and then we talk about early childhood and go all the way to death and dying. And throughout that class, there's so many different ways that trauma gets transferred through the generations, and so inshallah, I'll hopefully be able to draw just some of the ways. So it might feel a little bit kind of lectury, but I like to think that I'm a good lecturer, inshallah, so it'll be fine, inshallah. And then we're going to end with some pathways to healing. I'm going to give you 3 different strategies. I also just want to be mindful, everybody, that we don't have a lot of time. when I lecture about some of these things, I generally lecture 3 hours a week for 14 weeks. So that's like a lot. That's a lot of information to share. I think we have maybe at this point, maybe 20 minutes left of lecture. And then we'll have the Q&A. So I say all of that to say, we're going to really just barely scratch the surface. I really encourage you to take this information, use the language that I shared today, and take it to whether it's your mental health care provider or doing your own research about what trauma looks like in the body and also in your lives, subhanAllah. Okay, so let's get started. What is trauma? So this is something that I feel very strongly to define every single time I talk about trauma. We're talking about, in this case, we're going to be talking about intergenerational trauma, because trauma is like a lot of different things. It can happen in a lot of different ways. Now, oftentimes when we think about trauma, something traumatic, we sometimes think about the event that happened. We think about, abuse happened. There was sexual abuse, there was physical abuse, there was neglect, etc. That's traumatic. But actually, trauma is not the thing that happens to you. It's the response that happens in your body and in your mind and in your soul. So trauma is actually considered the wound that's left behind. That is trauma. And I say that because one of the things that I hear sometimes is that sometimes we compare each other. Oh, I went through that. I'm fine, right? I went through the same exact thing. I was there. I'm fine. But what we need to understand is that trauma exists differently for people's bodies. So our bodies, subhanAllah, are all created differently. They're all created very similarly. I'm going to talk about brain development in a second. But they're also created very differently depending on our experiences that we've had in our life. So just for example, how many people here are parents? Oh, wow, mashallah. How many people here are parents of more than one child? Okay, so then you'll know if you're a parent of more than one child that no two children are the same, right? You are the same parents, potentially, you're the same person, but two people, even if they have everything is the same. You can have two identical twins, you put them in two different environments, you put them around two different parents, you put them in two different schools, their experiences of the world are going to be different. And so that's going to affect then how they react to the world. And so the example that I give often is that if we're sitting all here today, right, and subhanAllah, an example actually that I will give instead of the one that I give all the time is that, as we're sitting on our phones and we're watching what's happening in Palestine, we all can pick up the phone, all of us, watch the same exact video, all put it down, and all have a very different reaction internally. And so you might see this, right? You might see that for some of us, you might have some friends, for example, that are saying, I cannot function. I cannot even get up. I can't even go to sleep. It's ingrained in my brain. And for some people, they're able to, right? They're able to walk away. They're able to watch the videos, respond, and then go take care of themselves and take care of their families. And so again, what I want to really emphasize here is that trauma is the response that happens to you. It's what's left behind after the event happens. The reason, the most significant thing to remember about trauma is that it impacts your sense of safety. So even though we are just watching videos in our phone, these experiences of watching these videos on our phone affects our experiences of safety, because one of the things that happens in our brain, and we'll talk about vicarious experiences in a little bit, is that if you're witnessing somebody else going through something, right? Say, for example, I was walking through the stage and I tripped. I guarantee that many of you are going to get up, right? You're going to feel maybe some of the tripping that I went through, even though you're sitting there on your chairs, but you're going to feel something in your body that's happening to you. And for some of you, you're going to feel it more so than for other people. And generally what happens is that if you can see yourself in me, you're more likely to feel it. You're more likely to feel the experiences that I'm feeling. So subhanAllah, this is an interesting thing that happens in our brain called mirror neurons, where you see something happening and your body reacts to it as if it's happening to you. And so that's another reason why sometimes what you see is that for Muslims, for Palestinians, for Arabs, when we watch these videos, we see ourselves, right? You see many communities of color rising and saying, this is all happening to us, all together, because we all see ourselves in the people in Palestine, subhanAllah. Whereas you might be working in an environment at work or in school where people are not really feeling it as much. They're literally watching the same videos, they're reading the same headlines, the same stories, and they don't feel it as much in their body because their sense of safety is not being altered. So trauma is the response that happens in your body. It's when your sense of safety is being altered. And so our brain, the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created our brain and our bodies is to protect us. We're supposed to be surviving. And so That's why if you touch something hot, you are not going to keep your hand on it. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to move your hand. Even though you want to maybe even burn yourself, your body is just not going to let you. You have to really exert a lot of effort into keeping yourself in harm's way. So one of the things that our brain does is that as soon as it recognizes, oh, something is stressful, something is harmful, it tries to remove you. So much so that you have no control over it. So one of the things that potentially happens to folks in this room, and it happens to me even though I do many public speaking engagements and I speak in front of audiences a lot, is if you're ever having to speak in front of a group of people, you start feeling nervous, right? You start feeling nervous, you start feeling sick, you start feeling like you're gonna throw up. And so that is actually a stress response that happens in your body. And so what's happening is that your body is like, oh no, stress, something bad is happening, we need to protect you. Okay, you don't need to be digesting food right now. Everything needs to come out of your body. And so you might hear, and excuse the detail here, but I'm sure some of you have heard of anxiety poops, right? Where it's like you need to just actually go use the bathroom because you're so anxious. And so what happens in your body is that when your mind thinks, oh, we're in a sense of danger, I need to protect myself, then all of the other stuff goes out, right? Your body is like, I need to just function, I need to survive. So what actually also happens is that your frontal cortex, again, we'll talk about the brain in a second, your frontal cortex, where you make a lot of critical thinking decisions, you're very logical, it shuts down. The blood starts flowing to the inner part of your brain that's only focused on survival. Are you breathing? Can you move? Those are the two things. Those are the things that are actually really important. And so another reason that when you're going through something traumatic, your brain is actually not going to operate in a very logical, abstract way to help you escape that situation that you're in. And so I want us to all be very, very aware that trauma, when the traumatic response, it actually changes our physiology. It changes the way the blood flows in our body. It changes the direction of the neurons that are going in our brain, subhanAllah. Okay, so let's continue. Does that make sense? So trauma is the response, not the event. Good, great job. Okay, so there's a couple more things I want to say before we actually move to the connected through generation piece. Is that trauma, when you think about trauma, something happening to you, one of the things that we miss out on, and there's a lot of research that's been done on this, is that trauma can be abuse. It can be something that's actually happening to you, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. It can also be neglect. And so as we talk about trauma through the generations, one of the things that it's important to note is that what happens to us in childhood affects us for the rest of our lives. Now, it may affect us permanently for the rest of our lives, or it may just affect us until we do something about it. And so when you're a really young person and you're growing and developing, you have certain needs that you need in order to survive. How many people, I'm guessing many of us here have been around children, right? If you let a child kind of walk around, you're gonna see them kind of try to play with things that they're probably not supposed to do, or you're gonna see them kind of become distressed, maybe they'll hurt themselves. And so what a child needs is protection. And so children, middle schoolers, you want like early childhood, late childhood, and then adolescents. They all have specific needs, and even us as adults, right? We need to be cared for, we need to be loved in order for us to feel a sense of safety. And so neglect, not meeting some of your needs as children, also causes a traumatic response. The same response that, hey, I'm in danger and there's nothing there to help me, starts becoming activated. And so one of the things that happens with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is that after the event happens, you have a traumatic response. With PTSD, the trauma stays in your body. So even though the danger is gone, you're still experiencing the symptoms that you are in danger. And so oftentimes I sit with my clients and my patients, and I'm sitting with them and I'm talking with them, and I tell them, like, what you're telling me, it sounds like you right now feel like something bad is going to happen to you. And so I sometimes sit with people, whether it's in clinical work or even in the community work that I do, and there's a sense of feeling, and I'm sure many people can also relate to this in this room, you're sitting there, nothing is happening. You might be sitting in your room, right? You might be just driving to work, and it just feels like something bad is going to happen to you, that something bad is happening to you. And that's because your traumatic response is still activated. And so one of the things that happens is that sometimes that's activated because of something that's related all the way down in childhood. and there is something that triggered you unconsciously that activated that response. Like, hey, actually you're in danger, right? Maybe you saw somebody that looked like somebody in your childhood. Or maybe somebody said something to you that made you feel a certain way that reminded you of how you felt when you were a child. And so there's trauma in regards to abuse that can happen, but also neglect. And then the third category is that actually when you witness abuse happening in front of you, so domestic violence, if you're witnessing your parents going through physical abuse, for example, or any abuse, if you're witnessing your siblings, if you're witnessing what's happening in Palestine, for example, subhanAllah, just witnessing the things that are going on around you can affect you and affect your traumatic response as well, subhanAllah. And so just a reminder that we are all connected in all these different ways that we don't really think about, subhanAllah. All right, so let's talk about a couple of ways that trauma connects us. Trauma can be passed down through the generations. So we're going to start with talking about early brain development, and then we're going to talk about attachment styles, inshallah, attachment theory. Jazakallah khairan. So, all right, so the brain is such a powerful mechanism. Anybody here study the brain? Love it. Wow. Yes. Isn't it such an interesting organ, subhanAllah? And we know actually very, very little. We know a lot, but we know very little compared to what we could actually know about how the brain works. So it's a really incredible thing. So the thing that I want y'all to remember from this lecture is that when children are born, even before they're born, and as we grow older, I think for a long time, and I'll just admit this for myself, I thought that like, oh, you have a whole brain, and then you grow up and your brain gets bigger. That's not how it works. So what actually happens is that there are different parts of the brain, and you'll see 1, 2, 3, that develop as you get older. So the brain stem, which focuses on heart rate, blood pressure, sleep cycles, that is going on during gestation. Like when you're still in the womb, that's the part of your brain that's developing, and also in the first like few months of your life. And so that means that even when you are in the womb, the stress that your mom is experiencing is going to affect the development of the most vital part of your being, which is your heart rate, your ability to breathe, your blood pressure, your sleep cycles, your appetite, just like the most basic functioning pieces of our functioning in our day-to-day life. So that means, yes, indeed, that if you are having some of these issues around heart rate, blood pressure, sleep cycles, appetite, one of the things that I train my students to do is to ask people, tell me about what your mother's pregnancy was like. And so one of the ways that you can probably know a little bit more about what's happening to you and understanding yourself is thinking about what was my mom's experiences, what were my parents' experiences when I was still in the womb. And so for some of you, you may already know. You may already know that your mother or your parents were going through a very difficult time. Maybe it was abuse. Maybe it was poverty. Maybe it was financial stress. Maybe it was immigration. Maybe it was being, going through a refugee status. Maybe it's going through just an insistent amount of discrimination and racism, for example. And so all of those things, the stress that the mom experiences is going to be affecting the development of the brain of the child that is going to affect them for the rest of their lives. Now, that may sound really heavy and also like, oh my God, that's a lot of responsibility, but life is stressful, what happens? Alhamdulillah, and we'll get through to this in the pathways to healing, so hold on to that. So the brainstem focuses on respiration, heart rate, blood pressure, sleep cycles. Then we have the limbic system, and that is developed over the first 3 years of life. And so the early ages of life become the most important parts for our functioning. So in regards to the limbic system and even the cortex, this is where our emotional processing and our emotional regulation happens. And so your ability, for example, to regulate your own emotion, that when something stressful happens, to take a deep breath and say like, oh no, I'm okay, like things are gonna be fine. Or for example, if something stressful happens, you start freaking out and you're like, actually, everything is just so disorganized for me. That's actually happening in your limbic system and in your cortex, subhanAllah. You have your neocortex and your frontal lobe, which actually develops all the way in adolescence. And so one of the things that happens in adolescence is that there's a growth spurt, similar actually to the terrible twos, which I don't think we give adolescents a lot of credit for, because if you're around a terrible twos type stage period, but you're an adolescent and people are expecting things from you, it's a really, really chaotic time, subhanAllah. And so that's where you are making decisions. And so that develops later on in your adolescence and into early adulthood. And so sometimes, for example, we expect teenagers, and this is outside of the realm of trauma, but we expect teenagers to be making decisions in concrete, abstract, critical thinking ways. And the tricky part about teenagers is that they do want to be treated like adults, and it is the time to train them really to become adults, but they're not adults yet. And so it's important to remember that, subhanAllah. And so I shared the early brain development because when the trauma happened to you is going to affect how it affects you and how it affects your day-to-day functioning and your ability to regulate your emotion, your ability to, but also your heart rate and your blood pressure, etc. Trauma also affects your memory. It also affects your concentration. And so sometimes I see people who say, I have ADHD, but what they really have is trauma. Trauma really affects the way that your brain develops. It affects, so as you grow up, and so we start with like the brainstem, then the limbic system, and then the cortex. And so as you're growing, you have little neural circuits that are developing in the brain. There is no subhanAllah 5 minutes. Okay. There's neural developments there are neural pathways that are developing in the brain. And so what happens then is that in your experiences of life, the neural developments, the neural pathways, think of them as like circuits, start shifting and moving to address and to adapt to the environment that you're in. So for example, if you're a child and you know that when dad comes into the room, there's an unpredictable level of anger that might happen, your brain starts to adapt that when man, or it starts to generalize when man, when dad, when parent, when adult, when authority figure comes into the room, I need to protect myself. And so it becomes ingrained in the way that the brain is developed over time. And so when it comes to pathways of healing, it becomes about how do you rewire the brain. The brain is such a beautiful thing. It's very plastic. And so there's a lot of opportunity for us to actually change the way that our brain functions. But the first step of that is to know what is actually happening and recognizing that it's happening in our brain, subhanAllah. Okay. So I'm going to talk about attachment styles quickly because I'm really running out of time. So when it comes to attachment styles, what researchers have found, and this is something that our deen also teaches us, our faith also teaches us, is that, we talk about like, how many people here have heard, well, at least we have a roof over our head and I'm paying for your school. You should be grateful. How many people have heard that level of language? All right. Yes, it's very common. And it's very much a survival mindset, right? It's like, what is the bare minimum that you need to survive? Now, what the research tells us and what psychology tells us is that you actually also need love, care, and safety to survive. Not to thrive, to survive. Research has shown us that if children do not have a level of safety in order for them to explore the world and to feel a sense of trust of the outside world, it can affect their ability to survive in the world, right? And so I talked a little bit about the brain development piece, but also socially, but also emotionally, et cetera, and even spiritually, I would argue as well. And so when it comes to our relationship with our parents and the ways that, so one of the things that becomes important with children, with babies, with children, is you find a balance between letting them explore the world, but also protecting them and making sure that they feel like they can actually deal with the world around them. And so the two things that then are being affected here are their self-esteem, their view of themselves, and their ability to trust the outside world. So early on, we're talking like months-old babies, right? When a baby is crying, and there's so much debate, right, about like, what do you do when a baby cries? Do you leave a baby crying, right? And my answer to that is, it depends on the baby. And it depends on the parent. It depends on so many things. And so when a baby is crying, they are signaling to the world. All the baby knows is, I am in distress. I need something, and so I'm going to make noise so that the world outside of me can come and help me and make me feel calmer, right? And so what should be happening then is that a parent figure or a caregiver or someone in the outside world comes and takes care of this child to help relieve them of their stress. Now, if that child does not get that care, they start to learn, at early baby age, learn that the world is not trustworthy. I cannot trust the world around me. And so I need to shut down and not tell people when I'm going through something, because the world is not actually a safe place for me, right? The other thing that parents do with their children that's really important and healthy is that you're teaching your child, like, okay, so you're going through distress. I'm gonna find a balance between like taking care of you and letting you be distressed a little bit. Stress is good. Stress is a good thing because it helps us grow. It helps us manage and deal with the world. And so then, on the other hand, you might have parents that are so over cuddling with their kids, over taking care. Like the moment the kid cries, the parent themselves start to feel that distress, and they're like, I need to make sure that my kid is never feeling distressed. I need to protect my kid from everything. And so what that teaches the kid then is that you, as a child, are not able to take care of yourself. And so that is related to the self-esteem. And so what ends up happening is people kind of fall into 4 categories of attachment style. And so you have the secure attachment, somebody who, sorry, I'm going to take this out. Oh. So you have a secure attachment, which is somebody who has a healthy level of trust in the world and a healthy level of trust in themselves, which means that when they're in distress, they're able to say, okay, I'm in distress. Do I need somebody to help me right now, or can I deal with this by myself? And they make like a healthy judgment about that. Actually, no, I'm actually really stressed out. Let me call my friend and like see if they can help me with X, Y, and Z. So that's a secure attachment, right? Like, or, you know what, it's okay, I'm just like really stressed out about this exam. I have some internal skills that I'm gonna use in order to like get through this. So that's a secure attachment. For our anxious attachment folks, this is where I'll tell you a little bit what the parenting looks like and then what it looks like in the person. In regards to the parenting, you have unpredictable, inconsistent parenting. So you have like a warm parent, but maybe they're not available, right? Parents have so much going on. We're all becoming increasingly busy. You might have like multiple children. You might have multiple jobs that you're dealing with, right? Your parents, for example, may have had their own trauma that they were shut out from the world and not able to be present. But with an anxious attachment, you do have a warm parent, a parent that really loves their child and is able and wants to be there and shows that love and warmth, but not consistently. And so that results in an anxious attachment style, which is basically where somebody has kind of like trusts the world around them, but doesn't have a really good trust of themselves. And they're overly trusting of the world around them. So this is what you see, for example. Okay, I see that she says no more time. Is it okay if I keep going for a little bit longer? Okay. Okay. Okay, Jazakallah. I appreciate it. But dude, let me know. We can go a little bit. Okay, I appreciate that. All right, so for the anxious attachment, so this is what you see, for example, in a person, and you might see this in yourself. As soon as you start getting worried about something, you need the world to know. You need your partner to know, your child to know, your parent to know. You need you need other people to come and help you regulate your emotions because you have low self-esteem around your trust in yourself to be able to manage and regulate that emotion. And so you might see, for example, and I see this often, parents who once they get stressed out, they're calling their kids to complain to their kids about what's going on in their life and they want their kids to take care of them. Right? Or they're talking to their partner, or they're like, whenever they're just anxious, they just need other people in the space. They cannot sustain or they cannot deal with how anxious they're feeling internally. So that's an anxious attachment style. Our avoidant attachment style, this is where you see more neglect happening, or you see parents that shut down their kids' needs. And so an avoidant attachment, and I'll compare this, I'll integrate gender into this in a second, but what you see for avoidant, for example, if a kid is crying, the parent might say, stop crying. Why are you crying? There's no reason to cry. Stop. You don't stop your emotions, right? And so what's happening here is that the child then is learning, I cannot trust the world around me. I can only rely on myself, right? And so we have some people, I'm sure in this room, we all deal with this, and different people deal with this in different ways. So once you're stressed out, you shut down. When you're stressed out, you shut down, you go hide. Nobody knows you're stressed out. You can't, even telling somebody that, if somebody sees that you're stressed out, it makes you actually more anxious because you don't actually trust the way other people are gonna be able to take care of you. And so what I see sometimes is gendered, is that for men and for boys, we teach our boys that you shouldn't be having emotions, that you shouldn't cry. And we teach our girls, it's expected of girls to have emotions and to be emotional. And so we don't train them on how to deal with their emotions. Now, this is a very generalization that I'm making here, but what you then see sometimes is that you have the avoidant and the anxious coming together as they're in a relationship, to be a couple, to get married, subhanAllah. And so then you have two people, one who, when they're stressed out, does not want to talk to anybody, wants to be left alone, but the other person, when they're stressed out, they want to be talked to, they want to figure it out, they want to know what's happening. And so you have these two attachment styles that subhanAllah actually end up finding each other a lot, but it becomes this like really kind of toxic pattern where it just feels like they're not being heard by the other person. Now, in regards to the disorganized attachment style, this is where abuse comes in, and this is where trauma comes in. A disorganized attachment is actually so disorganized that they carry both anxious and avoidant attachment. That sometimes they want to be close to somebody, but when they start feeling too close, they're like, no, leave me alone. I don't want to be close to you. And so that's part of what abuse does, right? Is that a person does not understand when you're a child and there's abuse happening or neglect happening, you don't understand how or when to trust the world or how or when to trust yourself. So sometimes you try to trust yourself and it feels like it's backfiring, so you don't trust anybody. And so you don't trust yourself anymore. You're like, I don't know how to do life. I don't know, I'm not good enough. I don't know how to do this. Or you start trusting other people and you try to do that, but then it feels like this is too much. I don't know how to manage then other people's emotions. And so you pull back, but then you're like, I'm too alone, but I want people in my life. And so you go back into being with other people. And so it becomes a super disorganized pattern, subhanAllah, in this disorganized attachment style. Okay. All right, sounds good? Okay. Yeah, alhamdulillah. All right, so now let's talk about what do you do? Okay, all right, great, Hanan. You just told me I have a disorganized attachment style. What do I do about it, right? And so just a reminder, right, that attachment styles, it's a large field, there's so much to say about it, but this is another way that trauma can be passed down, right? And so you might have, for example, a parent that has an anxious attachment style. And so if a parent has an anxious attachment style, then what does that say about their ability to regulate their children's emotion, right? Their belief in themselves to be able to be there as a consistent parent for their child. Or you might have a parent, or you might be the parent with a disorganized attachment style. So the question is then, how do you help your child go into a secure attachment and you're not repeating the cycles because, well, this is who I am, right? I hear that so often. Well, this is just who I am. You need to just accept who I am. Incorrect. We need to walk away from that because sometimes who we are is harmful to the people around us, subhanAllah. Okay, so when it comes to healing, first thing I'm going to say, healing is not a one-size-fits-all, right? Everybody here has a different story. We can literally go through each person, and you're going to have a different story, a different outcome, different birth order. You come from a different country. Your parents are different people. You might have parents that are in your life. You might have parents that are not in your life, etc. But there are many strategies that work for most people. So let's talk about 3 things that I want y'all to take away from this lecture. So the first one is going to be to slow down. Slow down. As I'm talking about this anxious attachment style, this avoidant attachment style, this disorganized attachment style, these are very quick reactive things that happen to you, right? It's not happening in your conscious mind. It's happening all unconsciously for you. And so it becomes important for you to slow down and take count and toll of what is happening to you. Pay attention, breathe. Breathing becomes subhanAllah, breathing, it becomes such an important tool for everybody here to use. Even right now, right? Just even paying attention to how you're breathing, because what happens when you're breathing, what happens with like a panic attack? When you're having a panic attack, your brain is going a little bit into that survival mode. It's like something is wrong. We need to freak out about something. You start breathing very quickly. And then you start breathing very quickly. The blood is starting to rush to different parts of your brain just for you to survive. And the oxygen is not getting into your blood system because of the way that you're breathing, right? And so what does it mean for us to, every now and then, just slow down, pay attention? And so right now, I want us all to take a deep breath in, hold it, and then breathe out with your mouth. Just that exercise. And so subhanAllah, slowing down and breathing is really already integrated into our faith. We have to pray 5 times a day. And so I ask for you, moving forward, when you say Allahu Akbar, take a breath and then start. That's when you get to slow down. For some of us, praying is Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Assalamu alaikum, Allah. Right? But instead, it's an opportunity for us to all slow down and take into account what is happening in my body. Do I feel stress? How is this going to affect how I speak to my children, how I speak to my partner, how I speak to my boss, how I speak to my friend? And so really slowing down and breathing. So the second thing, which we really don't talk enough about, and I think it's very, very important, is to grieve. I see most people in this room are adults. And so if you're in this room, I'm going to assume that most of you have experienced trauma in your childhood. And so that means that there are some experiences in your childhood that you did not have and that you will never have. And sometimes we get really stuck with what I should have had in my childhood, how my parents should have treated me, the experiences that I should have had, especially as people of color and as Muslims in this country, where we witness the people around us having these very free lives, what looks free lives, right? These healthy parenting, etc. And so it becomes then important for us to grieve and to let go and to understand that this is the life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us up until this point. And with this knowledge, now you can make decisions moving forward about how you want things to change. And recognizing that if you did experience trauma, and if it's going to depend on when you experienced it, the severity, how often, etc., experience trauma in your life, recognizing that there's work to do. And that because there's work to do, that's going to potentially, if you want to think about it in this particular way, take away from all of the other things that you can be doing in your life. Right? That relationships will be difficult for you, but there's a way to go. But in order to do that work, we need to grieve. We really need to let our bodies grieve, subhanAllah. And the third thing that I'll end with, inshallah, is becoming, instead of this attachment style being about other people and about being yourself, instead reorienting your attachment style to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because your parents, your partner, your children, they're not going to be consistent, right? They have their own stuff going on. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always there. And so learn about who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. Learn about the 99 names of Allah. What do these names mean? How do they show up in your life? Learn about the consistency, about the dignity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you as human beings, right? He all put us here to worship Him. That's our main goal. And so it literally becomes our goal to heal. Our way of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to work on that healing and to become attached to Him, recognizing that people are going to come and go. People are going to make you feel anxious and they're going to make you feel disappointed and they'll make you feel happy and they'll make you feel joy. But you can't predict what other people are going to do, right? But we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have so much opportunity. As much as the little that we know about the brain, in our lives, we know even little about who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is and the expansiveness of His mercy and His justice in our lives. All right, so just so you know, we have a lot of resources on our website. We have actually a video in Canto on intergenerational trauma. I highly recommend you go check it out. We have some therapy guides if you're like, I need to talk to somebody about this. Go on our website, check out how to find a therapist. We have suicide prevention tools. And we also have suicide prevention talks that we do and suicide intervention talks, tragic event toolkits, grief support as well. We have many infographics. These are two books that I really enjoy and I really like. There's a third book called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. And that author does a really good job of talking about the neurodevelopmental impact of trauma if you're really interested in this topic. And I encourage you to stay in the loop, join our email list. Our table is outside. I'm just going to go through these just a little bit faster in case we have time for questions, although I think I took up all the time, subhanAllah. Jazakallah khairan, everyone.
Jazakallah khairan, Dr. Hanan, for that talk. We are completely out of time, but I do want to ask questions because they were rolling in before we even started. Again, just echoing what was said before, we have a table outside. We are not going to get to all these questions. All of the questions can be answered by going to the table and looking at the resources that we have. So if your question does not get answered, and even if it does, please go to that table. If you really, really enjoyed this session, please give us a testimonial. We're giving out gifts for that. That way we can continue doing this work, inshallah, benefiting the Muslim community. All right, questions now. This question was echoed quite a bit. It was asked more times than I want to admit? How do you navigate and regulate emotionally in situations where the trigger is consistent, such as someone in the household being the trigger? How do you protect yourself or your children or other members of the family?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my psychologist brain wants to ask so many questions to that, right? Like, are you talking about like there's current abuse happening in the household, or are you saying that there is just something in the household that reminds folks of the abuse that potentially happened before? And so those are going to require two different responses. The thing about, and we talked about abuse and family dynamics yesterday in our lecture yesterday, but the thing about abuse is that there's so many things to consider, right? Does the person, for example, if it's a person, know that they're being abusive? Have things been communicated to them? Is there clear boundaries around what is okay and what is not okay in that household? And were there attempts to help this person help this person become accountable for their actions? Now, once all of those things have been done and they're still not working, this is where the unfortunate reality of separation comes in. Who needs to be removed from that household, right? And not removed completely, as in like cut out this person and never talk to this person again, but instead, what are the more firm boundaries that need to be made for this person and the next? So, for example, a household of, let's say, 4 people, 2 parents and 2 children. The father is physically abusive towards the son, and the mother is like witnessing this abuse and sees it, obviously does not agree with it, or does not agree with it, feels uncomfortable, has tried to like get the father to calm down, but still it's happening, for example, once a week, right? And it's happening quite unpredictably. Then somebody needs to come in and really create boundaries around the child and the father. And if that means the father sometimes needs to actually be removed and like go stay at a friend's house for a week or so that there's things that can calm down, definitely intervention. Somebody needs to come in and intervene in that situation. We talked yesterday about like the cycle. There's a cycle of abuse that happens. Once abuse is happening and it's happening more, like it's happening often, then it's not as easy as like one intervention is going to stop everything. And instead, it needs to be a consistent set of interventions and an actual commitment of the entire family and people outside of the family, trusted people, to help like stop that cycle. But if the person who is abusive does not recognize that they're being abusive, then you really need to think seriously about the separation that needs to happen. I hope that's helpful. I'm not sure if that answers the question. In regards to the triggers, if it's just the trigger and not the abuse itself is not happening, this is where really slowing down and understanding yourself really becomes important. With every like kind of process or experience of abuse, there's a different process for healing that needs to happen, right? So if somebody, for example, has experienced like sexual abuse in their family versus like their father or their parent or their older sibling was just really neglectful towards them, that's going to require a different set of like skills that you need. And so I'm going to recommend that you tap into a health professional, a mental health professional in your area.
We're going to do one more question, inshallah. What can I do as a parent to prevent passing on trauma to my children, especially when I have a lot of trauma from my parents, family, and upbringing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the first thing is going to be to really understand how the trauma affected you, right? So we talked about brain development. So really thinking about what is the trauma that happened to you? When did it happen to you? How does it affect your understanding of yourself? How did it affect your understanding of the world around you? So for example, for some people, when they experience trauma, and trauma at a large extent, they start to believe that there's no point in living, that this whole life is just like just a really horrible experience. And they start to pass down those messages of this world is very difficult and it's not a happy place to be to their children. And then the children start internalizing that message, right? So that becomes another way that trauma is passed down. So the first step is to understand, how did it affect you? And then how does it show up in your relationship with your kids? So if you have a partner, for example, I recommend, if you have a partner, like a healthy relationship, I recommend tapping into your partner. Hey, do you notice that there's things that I say or do that might be affecting our children in a negative way? Maybe you have very close friends. Hey, are there things that I say or do that you feel like if I say this or do this, have you witnessed me? Is there any constructive feedback that you can give me around the things that I do? Because sometimes some of the things happen on an unconscious level. So the first step is really understanding yourself. And then the second step is, it depends on how old your child is. Because children, even really early, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, they could communicate, but it depends on how old your children are and how many children you have, communicating with them and being honest and vulnerable. Hey, there are some, you don't have to share the details of your trauma. I actually recommend that you don't share the details of your trauma with your children, because that would traumatize them. Instead, say, you may know that, I've gone through a lot of things in my life. Are there things that I can do better in our relationship to help make you feel safe? Right? And of course, you're still the parent, so you have the judgment there, but incorporate your children's assessment of the situation around them, and giving them the agency and the self-esteem to be able to say, okay, this is how I can tell when I'm being treated right or when I'm being treated not right. Because what happens then is that when some of the times the trauma that comes through the generation, the children learn oh, it's okay if people abuse me. It's okay if my partner is abusive towards me. It's okay, my parents yell at me all the time, so if I'm in a relationship, it's okay if my partner yells at me, because that's just a normal part of living. And so being able to communicate with your children and just being very harsh and, real with yourself about what you're going through.
All right, so everyone's still sitting down. Do you want to do one more question? All right, so this question was asked a couple of times. You mentioned 2 attachment styles, the anxious and avoidant ones.
Yeah.
How do we navigate a marriage or a relationship where both attachment styles are present, and how do you avoid it from becoming toxic?
Yeah. Okay, so the question is, if you are in a relationship and one person is anxious and one person is avoidant? Yeah. So again, the first part of all of this is always going to be you need to know yourself. You need to really be real and admit to, yeah, I do this. And yeah, this makes you anxious, right? The thing about relationships, right, is also when it comes to this, the thing that I like about, I'm going to go back to it, that I like about this kind of quadrant is that the reality is that you're not going to be categorically in each of these, right? So it's possible, for example, to be kind of here in the anxious attachment, right? To be kind of here in the avoidant versus being all the way here in the avoidant. And so that becomes important, right? Figuring out how much do you trust other people? How much do you need other people in your life versus how much do you need that space for yourself? And then if you're in a relationship, in a committed relationship, figuring out, okay, what are the sacrifices, what are the compromises that I can make and that you can make? And what feels like an okay compromise for both of us, which is going to feel not only uncomfortable, but also a little bit like this is it feels like you are altering your sense of safety. So it becomes important that what we're talking specifically right now about healthy relationships where people are committed and actually committed to working on creating a healthy family system. And so the first thing is know exactly kind of where you are, know what your limits are. Maybe you're somebody who's avoidant and you're no, I actually, when I'm stressed out, I need just 2 hours to myself. Versus, no, I need to actually a whole weekend. I need to dip. I can't be kind of around other people right now, right? But then the other person is no, I just need you to text me once a day, just so that I know, so that I'm in touch, that hey, everything is fine, right? And being able to communicate and to negotiate with one another, this is what my need is, and this is what I need you to do, right? The communication piece becomes so important because I think sometimes we fall into well, if you loved me, you would know, right? You should just read my body language. We need to walk away from that, everybody, right? We are so different. We communicate differently. We need different things. And then that's where a lot of hurt and miscommunication happens. And so knowing, identifying for yourself, and then communicating with the other person and compromising with the other person. And recognizing that the same way that they're gonna be compromising and pushing themselves, you also need to push yourselves to help them feel more comfortable and more connected as well.